So, as by way of introduction, my name is Andy Warr. And today I'm going to be talking with you about executive presence, and more specifically, conducting research with and for the executive team, which is not to be confused with user-centered performance. So I was thinking about how to introduce myself to you today, and I thought it'd be quite topical to talk to you about some of the executives I've had the privilege of working with. So when I started my career, I started at Microsoft post-academic, and as you might expect, I did not get the opportunity to work with Steve Ballmer at Microsoft, just starting out. But that all changed when I went to Google. I was part of the Chrome and Chrome OS research team, and through some relationships with the Google X team, I had the opportunity to present to Sergey Brin about whether Google Glass should be have different sizes or should be a one-size-fits-all. Fun fact, one-size-fits-all. After Google, I moved to Instagram, and I had the opportunity to work with Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger, who are the co-founders and CEO and CTO of Instagram, respectively. And there I worked on a number of things, such as Instagram stories, understanding teens, as well as competitive trends within the social market, to name a few examples. After Instagram and a short career break, I went to Uber, and there a research trip to China led to a company-wide initiative to define Uber as a super app. And this will be one of the stories I tell today, in addition to the story about Instagram stories. After Uber, I went to Airtable, where a lot of my research and my team's research was presented to the executive research team there. In fact, every research readout that we had at least one member of our executive team in that. So definitely a lot of visibility there. And now I'm the director of portfolio research and insights at Dropbox, which is a mix of design research, which crosses the entire portfolio of products at Dropbox, market research, and research operations. Thank you. And there, my focus and one of the company's focus this year is to reboot our customer focus. So I spend every quarter, I get customers in front of our executive team to ensure that we're making customer-centric, data-driven decisions. Now, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that while I've worked hard and smart throughout my career, there is also a heavy dose of luck. I've been in the right place at the right time. I would also like to acknowledge that also, like, just the length of my career and the seniority and being part of various leadership teams meant that I've had access to executives that others might not have had access to. In fact, it's an expectation of my role that I'm influencing this at this level within the company. And then finally, it's not like I'm buddies and hanging out with any of these executives. This is part of a cross-functional team collaboration. I'm a cog in a much larger machine. Now, I'm going to be sharing some stories with you today, and I think they're super exciting stories. But these are the 4 things that I want you to take away. 1, executives only care about one thing: existential business problems that could threaten the business that exists, and 10x business opportunities, things which is going to drive the stock price up and to the right. Even when you are conducting research with executives, you are not going to have constant access to them. You have to work through a proxy network. You need to prepare to do things differently. A traditional research study that you have done without executives will not apply to an executive team. And then finally, you have to remember that it's not about the research. The research is merely a means to an end. So I'm going to start off talking to you about my first story, which is about Instagram stories. And this was a close collaboration with Kevin and Mike, of part of the executive team. Specifically, two things that we're going to touch on within this story is the focus on an existential business problem, and then two, the need to do things differently, so how things might adapt from a traditional research study. So to set some context, Instagram is the classic example of a hypergrowth company. Instagram was founded in 2010. I joined in 2014, and it had just under 100 million monthly active users. When I left in 2017, it had over 700 million monthly active users. And today, it has 2.4 billion. This is the definition of hockey stick growth. Now, despite growing user growth, there was a problem. In 2015, we identified that sharing was decreasing. Furthermore, there was another app known as Snapchat that was having their own hockey stick growth moment. Sorry, the notes here are like super small. Now, it's super important that you actually have, the reason why people come to applications like Instagram primarily is to consume content. If you get a reduction, thank you so much. If you get a reduction in the amount of content shared, then people are not going to engage in much, which ultimately decreases time spent and decreases usage. So it's like a vicious cycle that's going on here. So Kevin asked us to understand the barriers to sharing on Instagram. And I asked a user experience researcher on my team, Nicole Chen, to lead the project. And she identified a number of inhibitors to sharing. The first was audience. Users' audiences were compounding on Instagram. They were getting so large. And they also included people that they didn't necessarily want to share with. And I'm looking at anyone in the room who is a parent. Frequency. There was this unspoken rule that you can only post once a day on Instagram. If you posted more, you would appear too frequently in someone's feed, and that was not cool. Permanence. When you post to Instagram, the post is there forever. Anyone could go to a user's profile to see that post, and deleting the post was a multi-step process. And then quality. You may have heard the term Insta-worthy. It's the perceived quality bar that a post has to meet in order to be posted on the platform. A teen once said to me, Instagram is the representation of your best self. Think about that for a second. That's a high quality bar. So, based on these learnings, a small team, which included Nicole, a designer, and a couple of engineers, locked themselves in a garage, and literally a garage, not locking themselves in it, on the Facebook campus. And they would continue to iterate on solutions to solve these problems that we had identified. Every 1 to 2 weeks, the team would be conducting research to understand if these prototypes were maybe solving some of the problems that we'd identified. And the team would go to Kevin, they would show him the prototype, they would tell him about the results of the research. Unfortunately, none of these prototypes quite hit the mark, and Kevin would send the team back to the drawing board to start again. I'll just take as a side note, if anyone's worked with Kevin Systrom, he's one of the most visionary product leaders there are. You could show him something and he knows if it's going to have traction or not. It's very inspirational to work with. Now, this went on for about 6 months or so. And one day, Kevin scheduled a meeting for the evening. And I'm going to admit, I wasn't invited to that meeting. But I showed up anyway. Like, literally, I just walked in and sat down. And what Kevin did is he drew this on a whiteboard. He didn't say anything. He drew this, and he said to the team, "This is what we're going to build." And he proceeded to tell everyone in the room about how it's going to work. Now, you might be looking at this, and you might be thinking to yourself, yeah, that's what Instagram looks like today. Or you might be thinking, that's Snapchat. The vision was actually quite different. Each one of these circles at the top was called a reel. And a user could have multiple reels. So the example that we used, being a bunch of older tech people, was like, oh, an influencer is going to Coachella, and they're going to create a reel, and they're going to be posting photos and videos of their experience. And they could have a friend who's maybe another influencer, and they can co-create it together. And then after some period of time, it will disappear, so it's going to be ephemeral, and it's going to be cool, and everyone's going to use it and like it. And it was this idea that we then left the building wanting to build. So Kevin, Mike, and a small team were charged with building this product. We conducted research every 2 weeks with prototypes of varying fidelity, everything from a sketch to a design prototype through to engineered prototypes as we went through the software development process. Kevin, Mike, and many members of the Instagram leadership team attended every research session. It's also great the spread that they put on when you have executives come to a research session. You get wine and sandwiches, it's great. And they would be sitting in the back room, and they would be constantly messaging me while I'm on the other side here. And I would have messages on Messenger, which was the messaging platform we'd use, pop up on my Apple Watch. And I'd be like directing the discussion guide to get them the answers that they wanted in the room. And just like a traditional research session, after, we'd go back to the back room and we would debrief about what we heard, what we had learned. And I'll never forget something that Kevin said to me after the first session. It was like, can you get to the questions a little bit quicker? Like, we're all researchers in the room. We know the value of creating a rapport with the participant, an introduction to set the context, getting them comfortable with speaking to you, opening up throughout the interview. So when you get to those important questions, they're like telling you the information that you need. Executive doesn't care about that. They want the answers right away. So one of the things that I did is we did cut all of those introductory questions, at least from the session. Before they got in the room with the executives in the back room, I'd be meeting with the participants in the lobby, doing all of those intro questions, so I had all of that prep work ahead of time. And this is a practice that I maintain with any executive research that I do today. After a number of iterations, Instagram Stories was launched in 2016. And after 1 year, it had 250 million daily active users, even more than Snapchat. So the decline in sharing was the existential business problem that was a threat to Instagram's business and the product. And it was a problem that was worthy of Kevin and Mike's attention. Also, note that when conducting research with executives, they may want to do things differently. And you really have to accommodate to some of their needs in order to be making the most of their time. Okay, I'm going to talk to you about my next story, which is redesigning Uber. And this was a close partnership with Jason DeRogi, who was a member of the executive leadership team at Uber and the head of Uber Eats. And I also got to work briefly and through Jason with Dara Khosrowshahi. I apologize for mispronouncing his name, potentially, who's the CEO of Uber. Now, what I would like you to take away from this talk is the need to work through proxies, as well as the fact that it is not about the research. So when I joined Uber Eats in 2018, they had a practice known as walkabouts. And essentially what a walkabout was, it was an annual visit to a US city or another country. And it was an opportunity to meet with customers, delivery partners, restaurant partners, as well as the local ops team. It was an opportunity to take a step back from the day-to-day work that we were working on in product and think about the holistic experience that we were delivering to users outside of the bubble of Silicon Valley as well. In 2018, one of the countries we had the opportunity to visit was China. And the Chinese food delivery market, as well as the country itself, fascinated me. As a fun fact, in China, Meituan and Ele.me, which are the major food delivery companies there, they deliver 15 times the number of food delivery in China that Uber Eats does globally in a day. The scale is unbelievable. And I wasn't the only person that wanted to go. What was meant to be 3 members of the design team going to China turned into a research trip for the most of the Uber Eats leadership team. And then our friends at Grab also wanted to come along. So it was joined by their CEO and head of operations. So conducting research here, having many people on this trip required a different approach to thinking about how to scale research. We conducted 15 in-depth 90-minute interviews with food delivery customers, delivery partners, and restaurant managers and owners in Beijing and Shanghai. We had multiple parallel tracks in order to accommodate the number of people that we had on the trip. We also had the team participate in over 10 immersion activities, such as ordering food delivery through Meituan and Ele.me, as well as mini programs that existed in WeChat, such as Haiti. And finally, we met with representatives from 4 enterprises within China: Meituan, Ele.me, Kobe, and Starbucks, to understand some of the specific business decisions that they made for that market. Our goal was to understand food delivery at scale. But the key insight from this research that would redefine Uber's strategy was that Ele.me and Meituan weren't just food delivery apps. They were super apps, combining high-frequency, low-margin businesses, such as food delivery, with low-frequency, high-margin businesses like plastic surgery. That's serious. You can get plastic surgery through Meituan. Now, what you're seeing here is a recreation of a customer journey, which is in Meituan's corporate headquarters in Beijing. And it shows how a Meituan user could use their various services over the course of the day. So you might wake up in the morning, and you'll make a search for a restaurant and make a reservation through the app. You get to the office, and you can order delivery to your office through a food delivery. You can make a hotel reservation for that upcoming vacation that you have. Rent a bike to get home as it's a nice evening. Pay for dinner with your Meituan wallet. And maybe even get some movie tickets to watch with a friend at the end of the day. This might seem a bit extreme, but what it really talks about is how they are accommodating to people's everyday needs. In fact, 74% of new category users come from Meituan's existing user base. And there is a 57% cross-participation rate on Meituan. So I presented to hundreds of people across the company, including our various leadership teams, whether it was our design leadership team, our product staff, about super apps and the implication for Uber. I did not present a how might we, Judd. I also found someone who made fortune cookies, and I gave them 20 insights, and I had them printed on little bits of paper that went inside the fortune cookies. And then one morning, a colleague, I don't know why, but they decided to join me at 6 a.m. in the morning at our offices in San Francisco, and we placed a fortune cookie on everyone's desk. And when people started strolling in about 9, 10 a.m., they would get there, they would open up the fortune cookie, and then read the insight. And people in the office were saying, "What insight did you get?" And then on the back of that slip of paper was a Go link, or a short link, to the full research report. It went viral. In my whole career, this is the most highest engagement research project and deliverable I've ever created. That said, the executive team weren't quite bought into this, or so I was told. They were skeptical about the idea of Uber as a super app. But every time Jason went to the executive leadership meeting, he would be talking about super apps, super apps, super apps. It was a thing for the company. And he was using a lot of the materials that myself and the team had created about what we had learned on this research trip. And in January 2019, Dara and a few members of his executive leadership team went to Jakarta, Indonesia, to meet with Grab and learn more about super apps. And upon their return, Uber as a super app was a company-wide initiative. The VP of design at Uber asked two principal designers to explore concepts of what Uber might look like as a super app in 5, 10 years' time, assuming multiple lines of business. I'm a little bit offended that he didn't ask me, so I went straight to the designers and said I wanted to join them. I synthesized a lot of our insights, and I told them about how that could be informing their designs. I also did my own designs. This design of mine was actually featured in a Fast Company magazine article about the redesign of Uber. As you can see, my design skills are stellar. Went from a design exploration to a product team being spun up to design an experiment, a minimal viable experiment, in order to prove the concept of Uber as a super app. And obviously, once you have like a business like Uber, you can't just redesign it and launch it. You're risking hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. So we had to think about the simplest way to test this concept. Once again, I was not invited to be part of this product team. I was part of a different business unit, part of a different P&L. But I said to my manager, I want to be part of this effort. I've been part of it from the beginning. I have the knowledge. I believe in this. I want to make this happen. And she was supportive enough to let me go and work on another initiative to make this a dream happen. The experiment was simple. We basically just stuck 2 tabs at the bottom of the Uber app. The first tab was for rides, which was the native Uber app that existed. The second tab opened up a web view, which loaded the Uber Eats mobile website. The metrics that we were looking at were the number of rides, the number of Uber Eats orders, and we also had a guardrail metric for the revenue, rides revenue on Uber. So we didn't want that to take too much of a hit, as it was Uber's core business at the time. The experiment was a complete success. We had an annual recurring revenue increase of $66 million. And it did this by increasing discovery of Uber services, trial of those services, as well as continued usage. Go to September 2019. In this very building, Dara announces Uber as a super app. As you can see, we added a few more tabs to the bottom. And he referred to it as the operating system of your everyday life. But shortly after, I was in a product directors meeting, and one of my learned colleagues said, 2 tabs on the home screen is not a strategy. And he was right. 100% agreed. As soon as I left that meeting, I messaged the product team and I said, we are the ones to create the vision. We are the ones to create the strategy. And we're going to present this vision to Dara. So we did that. In February of 2020, on Valentine's Day, we presented to Dara. We had a vision that mapped out where we were going, and how we were going to get there. The specific reason for presenting this vision to Dara was to convince him of the organizational challenges that existed to enable this vision. If he believed in this vision, we needed him to make organizational changes to make it a reality. And that's just what happened. This was manifested to what you see in the Uber app today. But not only that, if I remember go back to those design concepts that was mentioned, it was during those explorations that the go anywhere, get anything concept was born, promoted in the vision, and realized as Uber's brand today. If you go to their corporate headquarters, you'll see on their TV screens the whole concept of go and get. So before I conclude, I would like to summarize some of the lessons that I hope you've taken away. One is this idea to focus on existential business problems or opportunities. The idea that a problem that could threaten the business or something which is going to 10x it, bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue. The interesting thing about the Uber example as well, if you're paying attention to those dates, 2019, right before the pandemic happened. What happened to rides as soon as the pandemic hit? What happened to Uber Eats deliveries? I saved Uber. I didn't. In my experience, members of the executive team, especially when it comes to product, they tend to have a singular focus. Find out what that focus is and align your research or whatever your initiative might be against it. Second lesson is to work through proxies. An executive is not going to give you feedback on your research plan or your discussion guide. You need to work through a proxy network. And if there is one person who I would recommend making friends with within your organization, if you want to work with the executive team, it's the chief of staff. They know the C-level executives and the CEO in particular more than any other person on their leadership team. Be prepared to do things differently. I spoke about a few examples of like having to accelerate the beginning of a research study, for example. I'll just share one more fun example with you. I'm sure many of you have conducted a home visit, and you know the importance of actually keeping that group who can go on the home visit pretty small. 3, maybe 4 people maximum. The moderator, note taker maybe, if you're not using an AI, translator, your observers. What about the executive security detail? They're big. And finally, 4, know that it's not about the research. The research is merely the means to the ends. Beyond bringing a researcher, what value do you bring to the project? At Uber, for example, no one asked me to be part of the design exploration. No one asked me to be part of the product exploration. No one asked me to go create a vision for what Uber would be 2020 and beyond. You need to seek the opportunity and seize it. To quote one of my design partners, what I like about you is you don't care about business units. You go where you can have an impact. I encourage you all to do the same. Now, I have one final lesson for you. I hope you feel motivated, if you don't already do so, to go do research with your executive teams. But I also want to pause for a second and tell you about something. When you conduct research with the C-suite, you get a lot of attention, but you also get increased scrutiny. You'll have more visibility than you've ever had, but you're going to have crazy imposter syndrome. And with an opportunity to have company-wide impact, there is also a risk of epic failure. Even today, when I conduct research with executives, my heart is pounding at the beginning. And if I think about the last one that I did, just back in December, when the meeting finished, I curled up in a ball and felt so drained, until one of the executives messaged me and said, "That was great." Until my manager said, "That was great," and started telling everyone about it. Until one of the executives posted to a company channel and talked about it. Always remember, as one executive said to me, fortune favors the bold. Thank you.